Ladies and gentlemen, the captain has turned on the fasten seatbelt sign. If you haven't already done so, please make sure the volume of this podcast is set perfectly to your listening enjoyment. Please take your seat, whether that's on the treadmill, car, sofa, or bed, and buckle in for the last trip. My name is Jamie Beebe, and I'll be your tour guide, recreating someone's last days in paradise. On behalf of myself and everyone behind the scenes, please enjoy the Last Trip podcast. And because nobody likes a long flight to get to where they want to be, let's prepare for takeoff. In March 2000, 23-year-old Leah Roberts packed her Jeep Cherokee, grabbed her cat, a few belongings, and disappeared. Not into thin air, but into the sprawling wilderness of the Pacific Northwest. Leah wasn't just another young woman running away from home. She had a plan, of sorts. A road trip inspired by Jack Kerouac, a personal journey toward freedom, self-discovery, and maybe healing. She left Durham, North Carolina with $3,000 in cash, no firm destination, and the weight of tragedy trailing behind her. The sudden death of both her parents and a car accident that almost took her life. Days later, her Jeep was found wrecked at the bottom of a steep embankment off Canyon Creek Road just outside Bellingham, Washington. Inside the car, her clothes, blankets, her beloved engagement ring hidden beneath a floor mat. But no sign of Leah, no blood, no fingerprint, no footprints, no answers. And as investigators sifted through the wreckage, troubling clues emerged. A tampered starter wire, evidence suggesting the car was crashed intentionally, male DNA, and a fingerprint that didn't match Leah. Was this a tragic accident, a staged disappearance, or something far more sinister, hidden in the shadows of the Cascade Mountains? Over 2 decades later, Leah's story still haunts the winding roads of Washington state and the hearts of those still searching for her. This is the disappearance of Leah Roberts. Before we dive into who Leah was and the timeline of her disappearance, we need to understand where it all takes place. The stretch of wilderness where Leah's trail went cold isn't just some random dot on the map. Where she disappeared and why she was drawn there holds its own clues to this mystery. Tucked in the far northwest corner of Washington state, pressed against the Canadian border and cradled by towering peaks, sits Whatcom County, a place where the landscape is as wild and untamed as the stories. This area is a destination for adventure. Hikers come for the miles of rugged backcountry trails. Climbers test their endurance against the jagged peaks of the North Cascades. Tourists wander through Bellingham's artsy downtown or ferry hop along the Puget Sound. But for Leah Roberts, this place held something deeper. It was a pilgrimage. Leah's journey west wasn't random. It wasn't just a spontaneous road trip or an aimless escape from the weight of her grief back home in North Carolina. It was intentional. Because nestled within this remote stretch of wilderness is a peak that, to many, is just another snow-dusted summit. But to Leah and to generations of restless souls before her, it was sacred ground. Desolation Peak. Perched deep within the North Cascades, Desolation Peak rises more than 6,000 feet above sea level. A solitary, rugged mountain crowned by an old fire lookout. But it's not the view that draws people here, or the isolation, or even the challenge of the climb. It's the mythology. In the summer of 1956, Desolation Peak became immortalized by young Jack Kerouac, the reluctant icon of America's Beat generation. After years of restless wandering, Kerouac spent 63 days alone atop Desolation Peak, working as a fire lookout. Surrounded by nothing but forest, wind, and his own turbulent thoughts, he documented the experience in his novel, The Dharma Bums, an ode to spiritual searching, to the beauty of solitude, to the kind of clarity only the mountains can provide. For Leah, Kerouac's words were more than literature. They were a calling. She told friends that Desolation Peak symbolized everything she was searching for. Space to breathe, to untangle the grief of losing both her parents, to make sense of surviving a car accident that nearly took her life. Desolation Peak wasn't just a place, it was a promise. A remote summit, isolated and wild, where maybe, just maybe, you could strip away the noise of the world and hear your own heart beating clearly again. That longing, that quiet rebellion against ordinary life, that's what brought Leah thousands of miles from home. But Desolation Peak isn't easily reached. Even experienced hikers describe the journey as grueling. A 7.4-mile trek through dense forests, steep switchbacks, and exposed ridgelines that test your endurance long before you reach the summit. But the reward? Sweeping, unobstructed views of the North Cascades. The jagged silhouette of Mount Baker in the distance, endless peaks stretching toward the horizon, and the echo of silence that Kerouac once wrote about. For travelers, Whatcom County offers all of that, the raw, untamed beauty of the Pacific Northwest. But it also holds its secrets. Remote logging roads that disappear into shadowy woods. Mountain passes where one wrong turn can lead to isolation. And trails where people vanish without a trace. It was here, somewhere in this wilderness of towering peaks and quiet desperation, that Leah Roberts' trail went cold. She came in search of answers and was never seen again. Leah Toby Roberts was born on July 23, 1976, the youngest of 3 siblings in a close-knit North Carolina family. Her parents, Nancy and Stancil Roberts, raised their children, Kara, Heath, and little Leah, in the Durham area, where life was filled with typical family moments, sibling bonds, and quiet routines. But Leah was never typical. Even as a child, people noticed there was something different about her. She was bright, creative, free-spirited, the kind of person who could light up a room with her charm, her curiosity, and that easy, magnetic smile. Friends described her as wise beyond her years, a true old soul who somehow blended youthful energy with a thoughtful, reflective nature. She was also fiercely close with her family, especially her older sister Kara, just 2 years her senior. Leah was the baby, the youngest, the one they looked after. But she carried herself with a quiet strength and independence that often made her seem older than her age. At 17, Leah's father, Stancil, was diagnosed with a chronic lung illness. It was a heavy weight for a family so close, but Leah pressed on, resilient, determined to chase her dreams. She enrolled at North Carolina State University in Raleigh, majoring in Spanish and anthropology. She thrived academically and athletically. As a talented soccer player, competitive on the field, but known for her easygoing, personable nature off of it. Her friends remember her as the kind of person everyone gravitated toward, charming, smart, and endlessly friendly. But there was always a part of herself she kept tucked away. Then, life changed, quickly and cruelly. Tragedy struck her sophomore year. In February of 1997, her mother, Nancy, died suddenly of heart disease. The loss shattered Leah's world. She took time off to grieve, to process the unimaginable, but eventually returned to school, her determination as steady as ever. But fate wasn't finished testing her. In the fall of 1998, Leah survived a devastating car accident that could have easily claimed her life. A truck pulled out in front of her with no time to brake. In those final seconds, she was certain she wouldn't survive. But she did, barely. Leah suffered a punctured lung and a shattered femur. Doctors had to implant a metal rod alongside her femur to help it heal. Recovery was brutal, but Leah pulled through, and with that survival came a profound shift. Leah later confided in Kara that surviving that crash made her feel born again. It was a wake-up call. She realized how fragile life could be and how important it was to truly live. From that moment on, she changed. She became more introspective, more philosophical. She explored new passions, travel, spirituality, art. She picked up a guitar, fell in love with photography, and found comfort in writing poetry about the meaning of life. She began to spend her days in local coffee shops, making new friends, lingering over deep conversations, thinking about her place in the world. But the tragedies kept coming. In April 1999, just 3 weeks before she was set to leave for field program in Costa Rica, Leah's father passed away. It was another crushing blow. But instead of canceling the trip, Leah pushed forward. She granted Kara power of attorney over her bank accounts, understanding that with both parents gone, she needed a safety net. Her brother Heath saw how these losses transformed his sister. He later reflected, "I think that all of those things together had the cumulative effect of making Leah even more introspective, probably more aware that although she didn't know what she wanted to do, I think she was unhappy that she wasn't achieving it." Leah longed for meaning, for answers. She loved to travel. She wanted to see the world and find herself within it. Her friend Susie Smith described her simply, "Leah is just a very awesome person. Everybody that meets her likes her. Very personable, great smile. But she's kind of private also, definitely." It was that mix of warmth and mystery that made Leah unforgettable. But as her grief deepened, Leah began to pull away from the people who loved her most. Despite her siblings' concerns, she dropped out of North Carolina State just months shy of completing her degree. With the inheritance from her parents, she didn't need to work right away. Instead, she drifted into the coffee shop culture, spending time with new friends like Janine Quiller and her roommate Nicole Bennett, talking late into the night about philosophy, poetry, and the dreams of the open road. Leah found herself drawn to the romantic notion of escape, the idea of stepping away from the weight of expectation, of grief, of ordinary life. She began talking about emulating her literary hero, Jack Kerouac, hitting the road, finding adventure, and maybe finding herself. It was that desire, the search for meaning, for freedom, for a life that felt authentic, that would eventually lead Leah west and into the unknown. The morning of March 9th, 2000 seemed ordinary. Leah talked on the phone with her sister. It was a familiar conversation. The same swirling uncertainty Leah had been wrestling with for months. Her future, her next move, the restless need to figure out who she was and where she was going. And Kara didn't think much of it at the time. They spoke with the usual warmth, the familiar closeness only sisters share, and ended the call with the understanding they'd see each other soon. Later that afternoon, Leah made plans with her roommate, Nicole. They agreed to babysit together the next day. Another normal piece of a seemingly average day. But when Nicole returned home from work that evening, Leah and her white 1993 Jeep Cherokee were gone. Now at first, Nicole wasn't worried. Leah had been drifting lately, pulling away from routines, skipping schedules, spending time in coffee shops, writing poetry, playing her guitar, immersing herself in the world of Kerouac and Restless Wanderers. But this time was different. In the days before she vanished, Leah had been reflecting deeply. Her friend Janine remembered their final conversation vividly. We were talking about Dharma bums and how Kerouac spent time on Desolation Peak, just taking in all the beauty around him. Desolation Peak, solitude, clarity, space to figure things out. Leah wanted that. She craved that kind of distance from the world. The quiet, the beauty, the answers she couldn't seem to find at home. The next day, Leah missed the babysitting appointment. By the evening of March 11th, no one had seen or heard from her. Concern simmered into fear. Her friends and sister tried getting hold of her, but there was no response. On March 13th, Kara reported Leah missing to the Durham police. The following day, Kara and Nicole searched Leah's room, hoping for answers. Leah's kitten, Bee, was gone. And so were many of her clothes, indicating she left of her own accord and that she'd expected to be gone for a while. On the dresser, they found a note. It wasn't a goodbye, not exactly, but it wasn't the kind of note you leave for a quick errand either. It said, "Nicole, this is to cover bills for while I'm gone. Remember, everyone is together in thoughts and prayers, and time passes quickly. Have faith in me, yourself, everyone. Help Shep with Easter at Lotta House for fun for the children. Give Peter my laptop. Give everyone my love. See you soon. Tell Kara don't worry, even though she will." And scrawled off to the side in different handwriting was a circled message. April 23rd, on the road. No, I'm not suicidal. I'm the opposite. Remember Jack Kerouac. Below that, boxed in small letters, "Tell Nikki I meant to come, but I had no choice. She'll understand." And finally, Tell Melissa she should come stay in my room if she wants to come to Raleigh." Drawn along the outside of the note was a wide, unsettling grin, the famous smirk of the Cheshire Cat from Alice in Wonderland. Beside the note, Leah left a bundle of cash, enough to cover a month's rent and bills. It wasn't a runaway note, it wasn't a farewell, but it was strange. Her family and friends didn't know what to make of it. And Karen knew time was of the essence, and remembering she still had power of attorney over Leah's bank accounts, she dug deep. She accessed all the records, and what she found pieced together the trail of Leah's journey, one clue at a time. On the afternoon of March 9th, the day Leah disappeared, she withdrew several $1,000s in cash from her account. Soon after, her debit card activity lit up across the country. Gas stations, motel rooms, purchases tracing her path west along Interstate 40, stretching toward California, then curving north on Interstate 5. Her direction was clear. She was headed for the Pacific Northwest. On March 13th, just after midnight, Leah's card was used for gas in Brooks, Oregon. The security footage from the gas station showed Leah alone, calm, completing her purchase. But several times, she peers over her shoulder, scanning the parking lot, almost wary. Was she nervous, waiting for someone? Was she checking on her kitten in the car? Or simply cautious, traveling solo through unfamiliar places? We just don't know. And then another clue emerged, a movie ticket stub, eventually found tucked among her belongings. Leah had gone to an afternoon showing of American Beauty at the Bellis Fair Mall in Bellingham, Washington. It was a 5 to 6 hour drive from where she bought gas earlier that morning. Her siblings believed she probably grabbed dinner after the movie. Near the theater, the mall's only sit-down restaurant, the Elephant and Castle, became the next breadcrumb in her trail. There, police found 2 men who remembered meeting Leah that evening, seated at the counter between them. They described her as talkative, open, friendly, full of plans for her road trip, full of admiration for Jack Kerouac. One of the men told police that Leah left the restaurant with a third person, a man she called Barry, and he provided enough detail for a police sketch. But no other witness, including the second man, could corroborate this story. No one else remembered seeing Barry. No one could confirm his existence. 5 days later, in the early morning hours of March 18th, 2000, a couple jogging along Canyon Creek Road, a quiet wooded side route off Washington's Mount Baker Highway, noticed something strange. Clothing, scattered along the roadside. Some pieces tied to branches, fluttering like forgotten flags in the morning breeze. Peering over the embankment, they spotted a crumpled wreck at the bottom of the steep slope. It was Leah's Jeep. The vehicle was mangled. The path through the trees suggested the Jeep had gone off the road at nearly 40 miles an hour, flipping, rolling, crashing its way down the embankment. But something wasn't quite right. Blankets and pillows were pinned up inside the broken windows, like makeshift curtains. Someone had tried to create shelter after the crash. Inside the Jeep, investigators found Leah's belongings. Her passport, driver's license, checkbook, clothes, guitar, CDs, cat carrier, and bits of cat food. But no sign of Leah and no sign of her kitten. Her valuables were untouched. $3,500 in cash, jewelry, left behind as if robbery wasn't the motive. And the most chilling discovery of all, under the driver's seat floor mat was Leah's mother's engagement ring. Her friends and family were adamant. Leah never took that ring off. It was sacred. The only reason it would be hidden under the floor mat was if something terrible had happened. There was no blood, no evidence of injury, no sign that anyone had been inside the Jeep when it crashed. Investigators concluded the accident may have been staged. Nearby, scattered through the woods, were more of Leah's belongings. Her camera was recovered, with undeveloped film still inside. But when her siblings developed the roll, they found only old photos from the previous winter, not a single snapshot from this trip. The road Leah dreamed of following west led her into the unknown. Her Jeep was found, her belongings were abandoned, but Leah was gone. And 25 years later, the question remains, Where is Leah Roberts? When Leah's Jeep was discovered wrecked at the bottom of a steep embankment off Canyon Creek Road, her family's worst fears came rushing to the surface. But there were no answers waiting by the roadside, only more questions. Within days of the discovery, Leah's siblings boarded a flight to Washington. They left behind their lives in North Carolina to stand on unfamiliar ground, determined to find their sister, or at the very least, the truth. They walked the crash site with deputies from Whatcom County Sheriff's Office, the same stretch of isolated mountain road where Leah's Jeep had careened off the edge. They peered down the embankment, retraced the path of her belongings scattered through the trees, and tried to make sense of what felt impossible. With the help of investigators, they designed missing person flyers and papered the town of Bellingham, coffee shops, gas stations, storefront windows. They stopped strangers on the street, business owners, shoppers, hikers passing through town. Everyone was asked the same question. Had they seen Leah Roberts? And then a glimmer of hope, when a few days later, the Whatcom County Sheriff's Office received a strange call. A man on the other end of the line said his wife had seen Leah, disoriented and confused, wandering around a gas station in Everett, Washington, which is a little closer to Seattle. But before authorities could get his name or press for details, the caller panicked and he hung up. Now, despite the abrupt ending, detectives considered the tip credible. It aligned with Leah's last known movements, but without the man's identity or his wife's confirmation, it became just another piece of the puzzle, frustratingly incomplete. For weeks, search teams scoured the dense woods surrounding Leah's crash site. Ground teams combed the forest floor, helicopters circled overhead. Cadaver dogs, trained to track human remains, were brought in, as were metal detectors, carefully calibrated to detect the metal rod still fused to Leah's femur from a previous accident. But despite every effort, there was nothing. No new evidence, no Leah, just a silence that grew heavier with each passing day. The FBI joined the investigation, their jurisdiction triggered by Leah's travel across state lines. They meticulously examined her belongings, the scattered clothes, the guitar, the untouched cash, and her most prized possession, her mother's engagement ring, hidden under the driver's floor mat. Everyone that knew Leah swore the same thing. She never took that ring off. Never. Not voluntarily. Finding it concealed like that only deepened their fears. And then, just like that, the investigation stalled and went cold. In 2001, Leah's case was featured on Unsolved Mysteries, beaming her story onto television screens across the country. The episode generated new Tipperite sightings, claims that Leah had been seen elsewhere in the U.S., but none of it led anywhere. None of it was verifiable. So the leads fizzled into dead ends. For years, the case sat cold, until 2005, when Monica Kazan entered the picture. Monica, a determined woman from Wilmington, North Carolina, had made it her mission to help families of the missing long after the headlines faded. When Kara reached out, Monica didn't hesitate. On the 4th anniversary of Leah's disappearance, Monica organized a caravan, a symbolic journey tracing Leah's route from North Carolina to Bellingham. The purpose? To raise awareness, to keep Leah's name alive, and to remind the world that hers wasn't the only story like this. The caravan has since become an annual event, a rolling memorial, and a demand for answers. Now, in 2006, the case found its way into new hands. Detective Mark Joseph, the original investigator with the Whatcom County Sheriff's Office, passed his files to 2 younger detectives. They sifted through the aging reports, evidence logs, and photographs. That's when one detail jumped out like a glaring omission. Leah's Jeep, the physical centerpiece of the case, had never been fully processed for forensic evidence when it was first recovered. That oversight triggered a fresh examination. When investigators pried open the Jeep's hood, they discovered something chilling: a cut wire in the starter relay system. Now, that single modification would allow the Jeep to accelerate, without anyone pressing the gas pedal. It confirmed long-held suspicions that no one had been inside the vehicle when it left the road, that the crash had been staged. But there was one problem. Investigators found no evidence that anyone had physically pushed the Jeep down the slope. No marks on the bumper, no dragged tire tracks. And if someone had jumped out of the vehicle to escape, they would have been risking their life trying to leap from a moving car at that speed. So the mystery only deepened. Further examination turned up a fingerprint tucked beneath the Jeep's hood, and it didn't belong to Leah. Detectives also discovered male DNA on one of Leah's articles of clothing, which circled their attention back to the man from the Elephant and Castle restaurant, the one who claimed Leah left with someone named Barry. The man's background raised eyebrows: a military past, his work as a mechanic, enough knowledge, perhaps, to tamper with a vehicle's engine. But the fingerprint? It wasn't his. And to this day, investigators have never publicly confirmed whether the DNA matched him or anyone else. Now, in 2014, hope mixed with horror resurfaced when a mummified body was found near the same region where Leah's Jeep had crashed over a decade earlier. And the coincidences? Well, they're little more than just unusual. The remains bore striking similarities to Leah. Estimated height, 5'5". Leah was 5'6". A metal rod embedded in the right femur. The same location, same side, same type of surgical implant Leah received after her 1998 car accident. And the serial number traced the rod back to a batch manufactured in the fall of 1998, the exact period Leah had her operation. It felt impossible. Too many coincidences to ignore. The rumor mill was moving heavy. But then, plot twist. Forensic experts concluded the remains likely belonged to a man estimated between 33 and 55 years old. Although many still believed that body was Leah's, and the forensic experts made a grave mistake. But shortly after, the profile of the body found was quietly removed from NamUs, the National Missing Persons Database, which is an indication the individual had likely been identified. But officials released no further details to the public. Now, the eerie similarities between the unidentified remains and Leah reignited conspiracy theories, fueled speculation, and left more questions than answers in their wake. 25 years later, Leah Roberts' disappearance is still tangled in mystery. Her car accident possibly staged, her belongings left behind, her ring hidden, DNA unaccounted for, and no trace of her or her beloved cat has ever been found. But the case isn't forgotten. It lingers on mountain roads, in annual caravans, and in every unsolved corner of the Pacific Northwest. Leah's case has been one of the most extensively covered missing person cases on television, podcasts, blogs, and social media. Everyone is working to keep her name alive so we can one day find the answers her family deserves. So, let's explore some theories. Did Leah meet a stranger with dangerous intentions? Did she vanish willingly? Or did something far more sinister unfold on that quiet road in Bellingham? One of the more haunting theories surrounding Leah Roberts' disappearance is rooted not in the idea of immediate foul play, but in the possibility of survival, of resilience, and of a tragic chain of events that spiraled beyond her control. So picture this. It's the early hours of March 18th, 2000. The sky above the Pacific Northwest is thick with fog, the air cold. The wilderness surrounding Canyon Creek Road is silent, but alive with towering evergreens and jagged cliffs. Leah, alone, exhausted from days of driving, navigating unfamiliar roads in a part of the country she barely knew, may have made a critical decision. Maybe she was behind the wheel when her Jeep accelerated off the road, whether by mechanical failure, a desperate escape attempt, or a moment of panic. Somehow, against all odds, she survived the crash. It sounds improbable, sure. But consider this. The investigators found no blood in the vehicle, No glass fragments embedded in the seats, no evidence of injury consistent with someone being tossed around in a violent rollover. The blankets and pillows covering the shattered windows, they don't appear as if they'd been thrown there by the force of impact. They were placed, intentionally, like makeshift curtains. Which leads to the possibility that Leah stayed with the vehicle after the wreck. Alone, disoriented, maybe bruised, but alive. Her mother's engagement ring, her most treasured possession, was hidden beneath the driver's floor mat. Something she would never part with willingly, unless she was preparing for the unknown, unless she wanted to protect it in case she couldn't come back. Maybe Leah, realizing help wasn't coming, made the choice to venture out on foot. Her clothes tied to tree branches leading away from the Jeep could have been markers, breadcrumbs, to guide her back through the dense, confusing forest. A trail, just in case. She may have made her way toward Mount Baker Highway, the nearest route to civilization. Injured, disoriented, possibly suffering from a head injury that clouded her memory. It's not unheard of. Trauma-induced amnesia, confusion, the mind protecting itself by erasing the most terrifying moments. And then, the unknown. What if a passing motorist stopped? A good Samaritan with the best intentions, or someone who saw opportunity in her vulnerable state? There's a version of this story where Leah, confused and unable to explain who she was picked up by a stranger. Maybe they brought her to a hospital, and in the chaos of her amnesia, her identity slipped through the cracks. Maybe she lived under another name, somewhere far from where the search was happening. But then, there's the darker possibility. What if the person who stopped wasn't looking to help? A driver cruising those remote mountain roads in the dead of night saw a young woman, alone, disoriented, and took advantage of the situation. Maybe she got to the road and met with someone who had ill intentions, got into their vehicle, trusting that they'd help. Or maybe someone struck her with their car accidentally, panic setting in as they realized the implications. Maybe they were scared they'd get in trouble, and instead of calling for help, they made the choice to cover their tracks, to dispose of her body elsewhere. It's a theory full of what-ifs, full of chilling possibilities. It could explain the gas station sighting in Everett, the woman seen wandering, confused, matching Leah's description. It fits with the eerie phone call to authorities, the man claiming his wife saw Leah and then hanging up before he could be identified. But like everything in this case, there's no proof, no solid clues, only fragments of possibility and plenty more theories. What if Leah never had the chance to make that choice? What if she never tied those clothes to the trees, never covered the windows with blankets, never even touched the gas pedal that sent her Jeep off the side of Canyon Creek Road? Because there's another theory, one that's far darker, far more calculated. The possibility that someone staged the entire scene. Let's break that down. We know the evidence from Leah's Jeep raises serious questions. For starters, when investigators re-examined the vehicle years later, they discovered the wire to the starter relay had been cut. That's a precise, intentional modification that allowed the engine to accelerate without anyone pressing the gas pedal. That alone flipped the narrative on its head. If no one was in the driver's seat when the Jeep careened off the road, then who set it in motion, and why? The most chilling answer? Someone who wanted it to look like Leah had an accident. They wanted authorities to believe she lost control on the winding mountain road, rolled her Jeep down the embankment, and simply vanished. It explains the crash site. The belongings scattered, the car battered, yet no blood. The staged interior, blankets covering windows like makeshift curtains. Her mother's engagement ring, hidden beneath the floor mat. Not discarded, just hidden. The details feel too deliberate, too rehearsed. Then there's the fingerprint under the hood of the Jeep. The male DNA on an article of her clothing, never publicly linked to any known person in the case. It begs the question, did Leah cross paths with someone who manipulated the entire scene? Someone who knew how to tamper with vehicles, who had mechanical knowledge and the motive to make her disappear. When investigators circled back to the Elephant and Castle restaurant, with no confirmation of the mystery man named Barry, no witnesses, no security footage. But What about the man who reported seeing Leah leave with him? He had military training and worked as a mechanic. Enough expertise to understand exactly how to sabotage a vehicle and how to stage a crash that, on the surface, looked like an accident. But that fingerprint under the hood, it wasn't his. So we're left with speculation, with a growing possibility that Leah's road trip intersected with the wrong person. Someone who saw her, alone, drifting through coffee shops, sharing her Kerouac-inspired dreams of escape, and took advantage of that trust. Maybe Leah let her guard down, confided in the wrong person, made plans with them, never realizing she'd walked into a trap. Maybe she picked up a hitchhiker. But staged crimes aren't perfect. The fingerprint, the DNA, the inconsistencies in the timeline. There are still pieces of the puzzle that just don't fit. So let's explore one final theory. The possibility that Leah's vanishing wasn't the result of foul play, but something far more personal, a conscious choice to disappear. Now, this theory feels less sinister, but no less unsettling. It's the theory that haunts families when all other explanations unravel. The idea that their loved one deliberately vanished. That they left behind the weight of their past and started over, somewhere far away, under a new name, in a new life. Or, in darker versions of this theory, the belief that Leah's disappearance was intentional in another way, that she left with no plans of coming back at all. Suicide. And with Leah's case, neither version fits perfectly. The pieces clash, the evidence contradicts itself. We know Leah was struggling. Her life, up until the day she vanished, was shaped by loss and longing. The death of both parents, a near-fatal car crash, dropping out of college, the identity crisis that comes when you're standing at a crossroads, uncertain of who you're supposed to become. Friends described her as thoughtful, reflective, searching, romanticizing the freedom of life on the road, Jack Kerouac, Dharma bums, Desolation Peak, the dream of disappearing from the ordinary, finding peace in reinvention. So is it possible Leah acted on that dream? That she staged her own escape, leaving her Jeep, her ring, her cat, and vanished into a new life far from North Carolina, far from everything that tethered her to grief? Well, at first glance, maybe. Her note to her roommate hinted at a temporary departure, leaving money for bills for a month. It didn't sound like a permanent goodbye. More like reassurance. Cryptic, yes, but not ominous. Then there's the scrawled message off to the side of the note, circled and deliberate. April 23rd, on the road. No, I'm not suicidal. I'm the opposite. Remember Jack Kerouac. That's a puzzling statement, one that insists she wasn't running to end her life, but running to find it. Now that part of the theory, Leah choosing to leave everything behind her to start over, feels aligned with her state of mind. But the details muddy the waters. Her bank accounts were never touched after March 13th. The last verified sighting of her was at the gas station in Brooks, Oregon, and then at the Elephant and Castle restaurant in Bellingham, Washington. If Leah had run off to start fresh, how did she survive with no money, no belongings, no ID? And why leave her mother's engagement ring behind? Would Leah have abandoned everything and walked away for good? Her friends and family just don't believe so. Then there's the darker version of this theory, that the road trip was less about reinvention and more about saying goodbye. But here's the thing. Leah's own words in that note contradict that idea. And those close to her say the same. Leah wasn't spiraling into despair. She was searching for clarity, for identity. Maybe lost, yes, but hopeful, dreaming, philosophical. Then there's the scene itself. If Leah had taken her own life, wouldn't there be evidence? Wouldn't her body or some trace of her final moments have been found near the Jeep? But after extensive searches with cadaver dogs, helicopters, metal detectors, the area turned up nothing, not a single confirmed trace. Her disappearance, if self-inflicted, was flawless. Too flawless. And even if her crash was meant as a staged accident or symbolic gesture, the investigation later confirmed it had been mechanically rigged. Someone cut the starter wire. And it's doubtful Leah knew exactly how to do that. It suggests planning and the involvement of someone else. The crash wasn't reckless, it was orchestrated. And if it was orchestrated by Leah, she just wasn't working alone. The voluntary disappearance theory tugs at the heart of this mystery. It tempts us to believe Leah is still out there, living a new life, free from the weight of loss, her identity hidden beneath a new name, her past left behind like an old photo. But the evidence, the fingerprint, the DNA, her belongings, they tell a different story. And the people who loved Leah, they believe she never intended to disappear forever. Whatever happened that night on Canyon Creek Road, it was not her choice. Leah Roberts' story is more than a mystery. It's a roadmap of how adventure, vulnerability, and uncertainty can collide. How a road trip meant for self-discovery can spiral into the unknown. And for all the unanswered questions, one truth remains clear. Traveling alone, especially long distances through unfamiliar places, carries real risks, no matter how prepared you think you are. But that doesn't mean we should stop exploring and going off on our own. It means we travel smarter, we stay aware, we protect ourselves, even when chasing freedom. So whether you're dreaming of your own solo trip, heading across the country, or just craving the kind of escape Leah once did, here are a few ways to stay safer. First, leave a trail that matters. Leah left clues, notes, messages, a cryptic farewell to her roommate, but they were not enough. No one knew exactly where she was headed, who she met, or when she'd return. If you're traveling solo, especially off-grid, leave a clear trail. Share your route with someone you trust. Map your intended stops. Check in regularly. Even if it's just a quick text from a gas station or a time-stamped photo or location ping. The unknown is only romantic in books. In real life, it's where people go missing. Second, trust your gut, but check your details. Leah trusted strangers along the way. Maybe most of them meant well. Maybe one didn't. Talk to people, explore, but always verify. Check reviews for hostels, campgrounds, gas stations. Stay in public, well-lit areas. And if something feels off, the person, the location, the vibe, it probably is. If you ever suspect you're being followed or watched, change your route. Go to the nearest store, gas station, or hotel lobby. Ask for help. Your instincts exist for a reason. Listen to them. Learn the terrain before you roam. Canyon Creek Road, where Leah's Jeep was found, is remote, twisting through rugged Washington wilderness, miles from reliable cell service. When you're traveling, especially off the beaten path, download offline maps. Mark the nearest hospitals, police stations, and emergency exits. Know the weather. Mountain roads can become deadly fast. Adventure is only empowering when you're prepared. And travel companions matter, especially the furry kind. Leah brought her kitten, Bee, a sign she intended to care for more than herself. But pets, like people, can complicate emergencies. If you're traveling with animals, bring their essentials: food, water, ID tags, carriers. Plan for their safety during breakdowns or unexpected detours. Never leave them unattended where they could be at risk. Leah's kitten was never found, just becoming another puzzle piece. And Leah's story reminds us that freedom, the kind you find behind the wheel, chasing sunsets and distant cities, comes with responsibility. We can't control every risk, but we can stack the odds in our favor. We can explore, adventure, and disappear for a while, but with safety nets, trusted contacts, and careful preparation. Because every road trip should end with a story to tell, not a name on a missing persons poster. It's been 25 years since Leah Roberts vanished. A road trip meant for self-discovery. A journey inspired by freedom, by Kerouac, by the hope of finding clarity out on the open road. Instead, it became one of the Pacific Northwest's most haunting missing persons cases. Leah was 23 years old when she disappeared. A white female, standing 5'6", weighing around 130 pounds. She has sandy blonde hair, bright blue eyes, and a beauty mark just above the corner of her right lip. Her ears are pierced. She has dimples when she smiles. Leah also carries the physical scars of her past. A surgical scar on her right hip and a metal rod that runs the entire length of her femur. She's fluent in Spanish, a proud vegetarian, and was known to smoke cigarettes. Those who met her, they never forgot her southern accent, the unmistakable North Carolina warmth that followed her wherever she went. Today, Leah would be 48 years old. Somewhere out there, someone knows something. If you have any information about Leah's disappearance, even the smallest detail, please contact the Whatcom County Sheriff's Office at 360-778-6600 or the Whatcom Communication Dispatch Center at 360-676-6711. No tip is too small. No piece of information is insignificant. Because after all these years, Leah deserves to be found. Her story deserves an ending, and her family deserves answers. And finally, remember to leave a review and rate this podcast 5 stars if you like the show, or hell, even if you don't. But either way, feel free to let me know what you think. Please follow The Last Trip on Instagram at The Last Trip Crime Pod, and subscribe on Patreon to support the show. You'll get extra research, videos, photos, and updates, and even learn more about my personal travels. That's patreon.com/thelasttrippodcast. I'm Jamie Beebe, bringing you your last trip and signing off until the next one. Thanks for listening.